Welcome to the Jersey Justice Podcast, featuring your hosts, attorneys Gerald Clark and Mark Morris.
So how'd you get into this? How'd you get into all this? You served in Vietnam.
Oh, how did I get into doing?
Being a lawyer.
Well, I love to tell this story. When I was in the Navy. When I was in Vietnam, you could do court martials, even though you weren't a lawyer. So I did one, and that was interesting. I was the lawyer, in quotes, on the court martial for somebody that had done something in Vietnam. And then when I was on a submarine. Then I was in Vietnam. Then I was on a destroyer, and which was great because I got to go to the Mediterranean twice, and go to the French Riviera and Athens and all over as a young bachelor with my white uniform.
Your long black hair.
And there's stories that I can't tell you because there's children listening. That was wonderful. But then I did legal stuff on the destroyer. In fact, we were in Athens, and I was the legal officer, and I got a call from the mayor of Athens. Your drunk sailors ripped down the Greek flag and kind of did things to it they shouldn't have done. And I said, uh-oh. So I went and met with the mayor, and I said, look, these were drunk sailors. We apologize on behalf of the United States, and we're sorry that it happened. And he said, yeah, okay, well, let's forget about it. I said, okay. So I worked out that deal, and then I went back to the ship, and I told the captain what I did. I said, I just saved a major international incident here. And the captain said, well, I have to report it to Washington.
You made up for almost starting World War III.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this was a little later. Yeah. And the captain said, we have to report it to Washington. I said, no, it's confidential. I had to deal with the mayor. We're not going to talk about it. And so he said, no, I have to report it. I said, look, do whatever you want. I'm getting out of the Navy shortly. I'm going to law school. And so when I applied to law school, I knew I wanted to. My uncle was a lawyer, and I kind of liked what I did. And I was a math major, so there's no jobs for math majors, although now there is in computers. But back then, you could only teach probably, or work for an insurance company as an actuary. So we started with 50 math majors and graduated 10. And the 10 of us should not have graduated because...
That's an ongoing joke, by the way. Sorry to cut you off, but usually you say, lawyers can't do math.
Oh, yeah.
Like all the time. So you can be a lawyer and do math.
No, we do math because we just divide by 3. So anyhow, so I applied to law school. And I applied to 12 law schools, Harvard, Yale. I figured they want a Vietnam vet, and I would give them a little diversity. An older guy, because I had been out for 5 years. And so my application, I'm told, to Harvard is framed in the admissions office. And it says, the guy that applied with the most balls that has ever applied. And I was rejected before they even opened the envelope. But then I did get into the University of San Diego, which was a relatively new school, and they had one requirement to get into law school, that you be alive. And so anybody that applied got in. And so therefore I feel obligated to give back to the law school, and I serve on their board of trustees because they're the ones that gave me the chance. So that's how I got into law.
Then how'd you get into the plaintiff's end of it? Did you go right into being a plaintiff's lawyer, or?
No, I started out doing everything. Myself and another guy, we went to every seminar every Saturday and learned about wills, bankruptcy, taxes, you name it, corporations, bankruptcy. And we learned stuff at the seminar, and then we did the case. And then we learned something new, and we did the case. And when we started out, I was teaching part-time at Camden County College, and I was offered a full-time job as a professor. And I said, look, I could do both. I could teach and be a lawyer. And the dean said, no, you can't. You have to choose one or the other. And fortunately, I chose to stay doing the law stuff. And then we realized that personal injury cases were we're really rewarding because we're helping these people and we're making money because, you know, the other cases, you know, you can make money, but, you know, there's a lot more money to be made in the type of field that we're all in. So that we kind of gravitated to doing the personal injury cases, and I guess that's, and we like what we were doing because we're helping people. You mentioned that's
Yeah.
So that's how I started.
Well, let me ask you: Do you does it take a certain personality to be a trial lawyer? Because, you know, I think some of the people that are listening to this are probably kids thinking about what they want to do, kids in college. And, you know, Rick Freeman, again, I always go back to Rick Freeman. He's just a great guy because my last trial that I did, I called his office, and I was in the middle of a trial. We were entering the punitive damages phase of the trial, and I called him for some advice, and he called me back within a half hour and spent about a half hour on the phone with me, kind of plotting out some things. And he talks about, you know, because people think of lawyers and, you know, whatever stereotype people have of trial lawyers or litigators. And as I said, I think he's one of the best lawyers out there. And he tells the story that he started out as a lawyer in, I think it was Ketchikan, Alaska. And he did his first trial. It was some small thing about people that were fishing. He was a prosecutor in Ketchikan, Alaska. And these people were fishing without a permit or something. And so he was prosecuting these guys for fishing without whatever they needed. And he said he stood up in front of the jury and he couldn't even speak. He was so nervous. He couldn't get the words out. And he's not a type A. What do you think, Mike? Does it take, like, to be a lawyer, do you have to be some bombastic type A in your face person, or what does it take to be a good plaintiff's lawyer, trial lawyer?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't want to generalize and say that you have to be an outgoing type of person, because there's good trial lawyers that are not bombastic and outgoing, that are very methodical and check every block and speak in low tones, and but it's, you know, what corporate America has done is they've also co-opted the legal business. So they will pay lawyers to go to Wall Street and work for big firms and start them at $200,000 a year. Well, that's more than judges make, and that's more than most lawyers make. And these young lawyers are coming out of law school working for that amount of money for law firms that have 1,000 lawyers, 5,000 lawyers, and they work them to death for a couple years, and then a few of them make partner, and the ones that don't make partner are discarded. And I know, as you may, a number of those people that are just so disenchanted that they made the $200,000 to start out of law school, but they put them in a little library and slid sandwiches under the door every day, and had them do research and do that kind of stuff.
Well, listen, let me interject on that, just so people know. In my experience, based on knowing people that worked at those firms and making $200,000 out of law school, you're literally working two jobs.
Yeah.
The hours, as I understand it, are something like 8, 9 a.m. to 8, 9, 10, 12 at night, 5 days a week, all day Saturday, and you're expected to come in on Sunday as well, and they're working two jobs.
And at 2 a.m, they'll get an Uber and send you home in the Uber. So when people think of lawyers, they think of Clarence Darrow or F. Lee Bailey or the famous trial lawyers, Melvin Belli, and and all the TV movies, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird, you know, so he's that guy is a trial lawyer. So, you know, I think that most lawyers secretly wish that they were trial lawyers, that they were in court, you know, doing criminal cases or civil cases. And if you're relegated to your whole career wearing a green visor, doing tax returns. That's good maybe for some people, but you really, yeah. And I'm sure they're good people that do that, and that's the choice they made, and I don't fault them for it. But I think what we do is exciting, and we make a difference. We actually, you take Ralph Nader, who was one of us years ago, who sued General Motors. His whole philosophy was, our cases make a difference. I mean, we really can change society for the better. In the old days, if you were injured by a bottle of Coke that exploded, in the old days, Coke would go to court and say, we were as careful as we could be. We had 10 quality control persons on the assembly line, and this bad Coke bottle got through. Well, we're sorry. And you lose because they show that they were not negligent. And then the law changed. The fall of the Citadel, when it now for public policy reasons, they said, if a jury finds that the product is defective, this Coke bottle is defective because it blew out the kid's eye when it exploded, then you don't have to show that they were negligent. It's now strict liability.
Right.
And that was done to help people. Look, and Coke had to raise the price of their soda by whatever, 2 cents or 5 cents to cover the cost. But it was our lawyers who made that happen, who changed to make products safer. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a number of products that are now so safe because of what we, all of us here, and all of us 2,600 members have been able to accomplish.
Yeah. Mike, if I can, you said before we do a lot of products cases, or not a lot, but a good amount. And you're right, the things like guards, installed interlock devices. I think about table saws and how years ago you just had an exposed spinning blade, and then you get that, now I think they have saw stop technology, they get guards on it and things. So that's like the national, the big picture, international things, just on a much smaller scale, just to give, I guess, an idea of sometimes the things we do. And I think the legal terms like the prophylactic function of tort, but that doesn't really sound too appealing. But basically the idea that what we do makes a difference in society and makes things better for people. I have a case that it's still ongoing, so I won't get crazy into the details of it. But this nice young woman's playing tennis with friends, and the court that she's playing on is filled with cracks and all that, and they had come and retard it. And when they retard the court, they used the wrong material. They didn't apply it the right way. And this court had been cracked for years. I think other people had fallen, other people had complained. But my client's playing, and she trips and falls on one of these cracks. She gets stuck in the tarry material and goes down and breaks her wrist pretty bad. And we send a letter, hey, this is what happened. It's called a tort claim notice, which we put the public entity on notice about what happened. And then you fast forward to, I think it was like a month or two later, and our local newspaper, I don't think it's front page news, but local tennis courts closed, and the courts are getting ripped up and replaced so that these cracks are gone. The tennis courts are now safe for people to play. And you don't have, I think they're renting the courts out to the local elementary school. You don't have kids running around, like elderly people going and playing tennis, people potentially getting hurt. That we filed this suit for this individual who got hurt, but in the local community, like with the products cases, in the global community, it really makes a difference.
Yeah. I mean, we mentioned some of the products earlier, cars and infant pajamas, but I forgot to mention that one of the biggest areas are in drugs. We were involved in the Vioxx case, where a couple 100,000 people had died of strokes and heart attacks because Merck made a decision to market this drug that they lied to the FDA, they lied to the New England Journal of Medicine, and they put this drug on the market that was unsafe. And they, to their credit, they withdrew it from the worldwide market, but there were 40,000 Vioxx cases that were brought as a result of that. And what's happened now is drug companies are more cautious now when they're testing drugs and making sure that they're truthful to to the FDA and imagine lying to the New England Journal and submitting a false article. But that stuff, as stuff goes on, and hopefully, and the other case that we're in was the tobacco case, which really was one of the most significant cases of all times, where kids, doctors, there were magazine ads showing a doctor smoking a cigarette, and the ad said, "Doctors say cigarette smoking is safe," wow. and kids recognized Joe Camel more than they did Mickey Mouse.
Wow!
And the tobacco companies put ads in Scholastic magazine telling kids not to smoke because they knew kids were going to ignore the advice and smoke.
Wow.
And they called teenagers and preteens replacement smokers because they're going to replace the people that die. And so our lawsuit that settled we're in New Jersey, we settled for $8 billion. That case really changed the way cigarette advertising was done. I mean, it wasn't just the money. A lot of good came from that. And now, if you notice, very few kids are smoking anymore, which is good.
Yeah. Like Jerry and I think both had kind of very different topics we want to talk about.
Mark wants to talk about jury selection. I want to talk about current events.
I got two or three more kind of practical law stuff I just want to hit real quick, because you had mentioned the Vioxx settlement and the tobacco settlement you had in New Jersey. I think you said one was $8 million. I'm looking at your firm website. It's got $7.5 billion on there. Is it like around that?
Yeah.
What's another $500 million?
Yeah. The tobacco settlement, I think, was $7 or $8 billion, and the Vioxx settlement was $4.5 billion, I think.
Were those mass torts, class action cases?
They were all Vioxx were all individual cases. There were 40,000 separate lawsuits.
Wow.
And 20 or more thousand were in Atlantic City. And at the time, it was funny because Merck said, "We're not responsible. We're going to try every case." So, I tend to be outspoken, as you may have figured out by now. And I said to the Judge Higbee, I said, "Judge, if they want to try every case, and we have 20,000 cases pending, if we try 200 a year, it'll take, what's the math, 100 years to try every case, and some of us may not be around by then, And she said, "Well, yeah, I guess you're right." And so what we did is we hired a PR firm, one of the biggest firms in New York, to get the message out on what Merck had done. And within a short time after we hired the PR firm, the case settled. So we don't know if it played a role, but I think it did, because the PR people, the Merck board of directors was split on whether to settle or not. But you couldn't try every case, because it's just physically impossible.
Yeah.
What were the injuries in that case?
Heart attacks or strokes
from
the Vioxx.
And did they know about that?
Oh yeah, they knew about it in the clinical trials, but they hid it.
Why did they hide it? Why didn't they tell people and do the right thing?
Because it was their biggest moneymaker, blockbuster drug, and it was the first time that the CEO was not a doctor. The CEO was a guy named Gil Martin, and they saw the potential for this drug. Actually, there were other drugs in the same class, Bextra and Celebrex, made by Pfizer, and Bextra was taken off the market, I believe. Celebrex may still be on the market now, but with all kinds of warnings, black box warnings and what have you.
But shouldn't Big Pharma get a pass on that because of all the lives they've saved over the years? You know what I mean?
If you're listening, there's a smirk.
No, I'm just let me ask you a question. If you participate in a beach cleanup day, right? You walk the beach, you pick up all the garbage. Are you then free to go litter in the park for the next few days because you've picked up way more trash than you're now throwing out?
So did you study philosophy at Villanova?
I was a philosophy minor.
No. See that?
Mostly I was a philosophy minor because Professor Keeley, who was one of my favorite teachers, his philosophy was that grades didn't matter. So pretty much everyone in his class got an A. It wasn't pretty much everyone. Everyone in his class got an A. So we'd be doing the exams. Martin Keeley, great guy. We'd be doing the exams, and he'd be like, all right, first one that hands in the paper gets an A. And these kids would look up, and they'd run up and hand in the paper, and everyone got an A. And so because I started out at Villanova, Oscar's laughing. I started out at Villanova in the night school. I didn't get directly. I was like contingent admission.
All right.
So I took a lot of night classes, which I found out the classes were easier because, it wasn't the full-time students. And that's how I discovered Professor Keeley. So I made sure to sign up for all his following classes in the following semesters, and I ended up having enough credits to be a philosophy minor.
Oh, cool.
But I also liked philosophy.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I had to take physics with the physics majors at Villanova. I had to take chemistry with the chemistry majors. But the easy courses, fine arts, philosophy, psychology, English.
Soft sciences.
Yeah, they're the ones that we got the good grades in that balanced out our grades from the bad grades from the sciences.
I was an English major, and it was the math I had to take in college that brought my GPA down.
So don't they get a pass on Vioxx because they've saved so many other lives?
No, you can't. If you knowingly put a drug on the market that causes this amount of harm, heart attacks, deaths, strokes, you can't get a pass. You have to be held accountable for the harms that you cause.
Isn't it? How about the pharma advertising? CNN, and then brought to you by Pfizer.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that an inherent conflict
The
of
US
interest? And then, are we going to go down the whole vaccine road right
Yeah.
now? But the whole vaccine thing, and you talked about how NJJ and our colleagues have been able to hold big pharma responsible for knowingly harming people. But that's not the case when it comes to vaccines, right? It's impossible to hold them responsible.
Yeah, the the pharma companies have convinced the politicians to have vaccines handled differently. There's a vaccine compensation fund that if you ever have a bad reaction from a vaccine, it can't go to court. It has to go to this vaccine compensation fund. I don't know much about it. And a lot of the COVID vaccines, I think, have total immunity because of the way that it was structured. But
when you were talking
but you mentioned the ads on TV.
Yeah.
The U.S. is one of the only countries where you are allowed to advertise drugs directly to the people. Most other countries don't allow it.
Jerry, just because I've been doing some mental gymnastics with your example. I'm picturing someone cleans up a whole beach, and then does that mean the next weekend when they go there, they can throw their water bottle in the sand and be like, well, who cares? But that's like saying, well, I've driven my car for 20 years, and I've avoided 10 collisions, or people stopped in front of me, I didn't hit them. So that one time I'm texting and I slam into somebody and kill a family of 5, I get a pass because I avoided all those other collisions. Or you think about like a property owner that's like, well, that crack's been there, and thousands of people walked by and no one ever got hurt, and then someone falls down and has a catastrophic injury. They don't get to say like, well, I get a pass. That's why that's one of my favorite things about products liability is you don't get like one free death or one free catastrophic injury before you need to change it.
No, the jury charge as you guys know, and the public should know, that if the jury finds that the product is defective and being used in a foreseeable manner for a foreseeable purpose, you win. I mean, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a choice that they made to. It's a societal thing that it's better for people to be compensated, even if it means the prices have to go up a little. But you mentioned jury selection. I do want to just comment on that, because we're talking about different kinds of cases and expert witnesses and abilities of lawyers. All of that, in my opinion, is meaningless if the wrong people are on the jury. So if your jury has a firm belief in abortion or capital punishment, or tort reform, whatever the issue is, and they come into the jury with those biases, it's very hard to overcome it. You remember the famous quote of Kellyanne Conway, that there's facts and then there's alternative facts. Well, that's not true. It's either raining or it's not raining. I mean, there can't be alternative facts. And jurors, so enough attention, in my opinion, has not been paid by lawyers on who is going to be on your jury, because that makes it, if a jury hates trial lawyers like us, if they hate people suing for neck and back pain, if they hate the whole system of compensation, and they hate that going in and have talked about it at cocktail parties and all, how could they decide your case fairly? They can't. So you have to make sure that your jury is fair.
How do you do that?
And
how do you smoke those guys out?
that is the topic for another 20-hour discussion. But in short, without bragging, I've always been interested in jury selection. And when Jersey adopted what were called best practices 20, 30 years ago, the one thing it didn't include was jury selection. And all 21 counties did jury selection differently. And I met with a judge, Judge Lisa, at a bar dinner, and I said, Judge, he was on the appellate division at the time. I said, this best practices, all 21 counties are doing this differently. And, maybe you should do something about making it uniform. And to his credit, he then formed what was called the Lisa Committee or Commission or something, and they came up with an entire new way to do jury selection. It's called voir dire, to tell the truth, VOIRDIRE. It's a Latin name. And what happened is judges didn't like it because they were used to picking a jury back in the day, 40, 50 years ago. The potential jurors were asked, can you be fair? Yes, I could be fair. Good, serve on this jury. Whereas the night before, they were at a party blasting lawyers, blasting people who sue, and yet they come and tell the judge that they could be fair. And we lost a lot of cases because the jurors weren't truthful. And in fact, one of my published cases is a case called Catando versus Sheridan Post, where the appellate court talks about jury selection and how many challenges you're allowed to use for no purpose. They're called peremptory challenges, and what you have to do in that regard. In that case, one of the jurors knew the defendant, if I'm recalling it correctly, and said, can you still be fair? Yeah, I can still be fair. And the appellate, how could that be? I mean, you're going to be biased. Just admit that you can't be fair, and we'll excuse you. So things have gotten markedly better. There's now a requirement that the jurors be asked 3 open-ended questions. Judges hate that because it takes time. But the open-ended questions could be, you were just selected to serve on a medical malpractice case and suing a doctor. How do you feel about that? That doesn't require a yes-no answer. That requires the potential juror to give a response. I don't think doctors should be sued, or my cousin died as a result of malpractice, or whatever. So you're going to get an answer. And a lot of judges, you mentioned Judge Bellegarde earlier, she actually now
in a very respectful way, praising her.
Yeah, she's wonderful in jury selection. She'll take the jurors into her chambers and ask them one at a time how they feel about different issues. And it gives you a chance to make a decision on whether that juror can actually be fair or not. It is, I have preached for all these years that it is the most important part of the trial. You can do background checks on jurors. If a juror only watches MSNBC or at CNN, they might think differently than a juror who only watches Newsmax or Max or Fox. And you can find all that stuff out by in jury selection. You can find out what political parties people are. As a general rule, Republicans tend to favor corporations and Democrats tend to favor the little guy who's suing. Not always the case, but in fact, one of the first Vioxx cases was tried by Mark Lanier in a very conservative Texas county, and he had a bunch of Republican evangelical Christians on the jury, and they found in his favor. So you can't make a general rule because there's always exceptions. But
let me give a little jury selection story that relates to what we were talking about. You said not all lawyers are the same. Am I in the field of view okay, Oscar? You want me to move?
A little very forward, but you're fine.
Move forward or back?
Go back.
Back? Yeah. All right, cool. So a little. You were saying that it is kind of crazy because if someone gets hurt, just go to the lawyer. Someone gets hurt and they go to the lawyer that did their house closing, or someone that helped do their business, and they go and they think you just go to any lawyer. People should know that if you get in a trucking accident case, or you get in an auto accident case, or you need to sue for a business, you can't just go to any lawyer. So going to a lawyer that specializes in real estate or business matters for a personal injury case would be like going to a heart surgeon for a broken arm. They're both medical doctors, so there's a whole specialty there, and it is amazing. It is amazing that it's not easy necessarily for people to find the right lawyer for their case, because people should also know there's law is a business. What we do, justice, and we like to think that we're doing good for people, but we're also doing well in terms of supporting our families and that kind of thing. And certainly lawyers give back as well. But it's a business, and it's funny that it's not easy for people to always necessarily find the lawyer that would fit their case. And I completely lost my train of thought here. What was Mike
You're talking about jury selection, like a jury selection story?
Yeah. So I have this jury selection story. All right. So listen to this jury selection story. So law's a business, and you can have a McDonald's restaurant that makes a gazillion burgers in an hour, or you can go to a fine steakhouse that's going to give you, they're both going to give you a hamburger, or you can go to a one restaurant and get a steak, or you can go to, a big steakhouse in New York. It's still a steak, but they're a lot different, and the quality's a lot different. And the law business is that way too. Some business models for law firms that I found, especially plaintiffs' law firms, it's more than McDonald's. It's a volume practice. You'll see their advertisements all over the place. You'll see their advertisements when you're sitting on the beach in Jersey, flying a flag. It's funny, I see a lot of these law firms that advertise for personal injury, but I've never read any kind of verdict or settlement in the news. We have the lawyer newspaper, the Law Journal, and they have a suits and deals section that talks about the big verdicts and settlements. And a lot of these firms that I see advertising all over the place, they're just putting a lot of money into advertising, but I've never seen them necessarily with big verdicts or settlements. And a lot of the business model is to just take volume and get whatever you can on a case. And then the other way to do it is the way Mike's talking about with, our approach is we take less cases and we put a lot more into each case. We don't take a gazillion cases. We reject far more cases than we accept. We probably, for all the inquiries we get, we probably accept 10% of the cases because we're very selective. And when you do it that way, you can do it the way, Mike, you're talking about in terms of putting more effort into jury selection, hiring a PR firm when the situation calls for it. And to a jury selection story, as part of that business model of trying to be a good high-end steakhouse, not a low-end diner where you get the steak, we would put a lot of effort into researching jurors at trials and jury selection. And in doing that, we had one particular case where we were looking these people up. And it's not just looking the people up, it's knowing your file and being prepared and knowing what the depositions say. And I'll never forget in this injury case, it was a case where a guy fell on a construction site. The defendant was the framing company that hired these subcontractors and didn't enforce the OSHA rules. And I was asking this guy all about his business and how he does the framing and what the bottle is. And I said, well, do you ever do union jobs? You know, because basically if it's a union job, the union is going to have some influence. And generally speaking, if it's a union job, they're going to more so follow the OSHA safety rules. And I'll never forget, this guy said, yeah, unions, no. And I kind of tied in the questions at the deposition to how unions enforce OSHA and help to make sure the jobs are safe. And he goes, no, the problem with unions, see, the unions, they kill you. The unions are bad because they make you, they cost you a thing, and they're always on you, and they're making sure, so the unions kill you, so no. So I'm doing jury selection and researching the jurors. One guy was a big union guy. He was donating to the union. He was president of his union, and it was a laborers' union. So what do you think I did at trial with respect to
Yes,
Mike, with the union stuff? I made darn sure that quote got in the trial. And when I said, I had him repeat that witness at trial of the defendant, the guy that was running this company. And he gets in his chair and he goes to trial and he's like, yeah, see the unions? Yep, that's right. They kill you. You know, the problem with the unions, and he says this, and you could visually see that union juror getting red-faced and get up in his chair like this. So jury selection's important, and the verdict was, it was a good verdict.
Yeah, so we had a case against Toyota for a bad seatbelt, and our guy was paralyzed. And Toyota spent $70,000 hiring jury consultants, and they put ads in the local edition of Newsweek and Time about the good work that Toyota did and an attempt to influence the panel. And the $70,000 they spent, they made a mistake. They left a World War II veteran on the jury who had his buddies killed by in the South Pacific by Japanese forces, and I knew that guy would never vote against vote in favor of a Japanese company. So just a simple thing like that. I told my client, I said, we have to be here for 2 more weeks, but we win this case. And sure enough, so that shows you how jury selection is so important. It is, and if you have a chance, anybody out there, if you have a chance to serve on a jury, you got to do it. I mean, it's a fun thing. It's your civic responsibility. Don't figure out a way to get out of it. You know, you'll be there for a couple days, maybe a week or two, and you'll be able to talk about your experience for years. It's a great experience, and it's something that it was so important that it was the founding fathers put it in the Constitution, a constitutional right to a jury trial, and a lot of people don't understand that that's part of the, what is it, the 8th Amendment or the 7th Amendment? I forget the number, but
you know, there's a struggle in this country between power and, you know, influence and a cultural kind of wars, and they're going after the jury system too, because that's where regular citizens can make very important decisions, you know. And when they attack trial lawyers and they say trial lawyers make too much money, reduce their fees, it's a direct shot at the people that rely on trial lawyers. And when they attack the jury system and say we should reduce trials and not have juries deciding, you know, it's a very important equalizer in society.
Yeah, we always say the jury acts as the voice of the community.
yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah, they see through they see through a lot of stuff. I had a client who said that because of his injuries, he couldn't go to the gym and work out. And as a result, he gained 30 pounds. And I said, well, that's good, So I talked to the jury about that, He was inactive because he couldn't go to the gym, and he gained this weight. And on cross-examination, the defense had found a employment application where he applied for a job at the time of the accident, and his weight was what it was, and he hadn't gained the 30 pounds, and he lied. And when the jury heard that he lied, they were going to jump over like you're a union guy, they were going to jump over the jury rail, kill the client, and then kill me for wasting their time. And I whispered to the client, I said, why'd you lie? He said, because I figured I could get away with it. But, so jurors are very perceptive. You have to be sure that you are candid and honest with the jury. And you understate things. So what I actually do, if somebody lost $500,000 in earnings, I'll say they only lost $450,000 to make it, and have a jury say, oh no, it's really more. I mean, so you always want to understate stuff.
You guys have anything else? This has been fun, Mike.
Yeah.
I think this is cool. I super appreciate you coming out here.
I do want to remind everybody that New Jersey, most people in New Jersey do not have enough insurance coverage. Right. Please, please, please call a lawyer. Call Jerry, call Mark, call me. We will tell you for free what kind of insurance you should have. God forbid you are hit or injured by somebody with no insurance or with a minimal amount of insurance. You can protect yourself against that by having what's called uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage, and it doesn't cost that much, and very few people have it, and most people don't have enough PIP insurance for wage losses. You can have up to $700 a week for as long as the disability persists, and it doesn't cost that much. And whatever you do, never reduce your PIP medical, which is $250,000. Don't reduce it down to $15,000 just to save a few bucks. But there's a lot of things like that that no one tells anybody about. But we are trying to get the message out to people that make sure you have the right kind of insurance.
We help people out a lot, and it's great when we can help people out. But one of the most frustrating situations we have is when, everything's great today, but the shoe can drop tomorrow, and you never know when it's going to hit, meaning a catastrophe or something. And people come to us all the time where that happens. And one of the most frustrating situations is when someone gets hit. I mean, I can think of a case right now. I went to visit this woman in the hospital on, I think it was like Memorial Day weekend or something, in the middle of a Saturday, and she was a young woman, married, watched her dog die in front of her. The crash was so bad. And she had terrible insurance, and the person that hit her had terrible insurance, like $50,000 or maybe even $100,000. I think her medical bills at the time I met her were like $200,000. And you can't do anything about the person that only has $15,000 that hits you, but there's what Mike's talking about is it's called underinsured motorist coverage. So if someone hits you, your own insurance can cover it. And it's not just the medical bills we're talking about. We're talking about you can't go to work, you can't feed your family, how are you going to pay your bills? And then you're permanently injured the rest of your life. And so you can buy underinsured motorist coverage where you can go against your own insurance company for those policy limits to pick up the gap where the person that hit you had nothing. It's really important. And like Mike said, it doesn't cost that much more.
Yeah, and happy story about that. I have a client where she gets hit by someone. It's a $15,000 insurance policy, gets rear-ended, and she has good UM/UIM. She's $1 million policy behind that, so she's protected.
So she can collect up to $1 million for her injuries from her own insurance company. It's really important,
and it doesn't cost that much. And just before we forget, one of the most frequent questions that people ask all of us is, how much is my case worth?
Oh, yeah.
And I think if we have a minute or two, we should
Yeah.
address that.
Yeah.
Because people will say, well, my cousin got X and my uncle got this, but every case is different. So what we in New Jersey, I would like all of you out there in podcast land of Jersey Justice to watch the movie The Verdict with Paul Newman. That's a medical malpractice case where Paul Newman is the trial lawyer. And the jury comes back at the end of the case and says, can we award more money than Mr. Newman asked us for? Well, that's the greatest question of all. I mean, now, unfortunately, in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania, you're not allowed to ask a jury for how much money you want. So the jury likes you and they like your client and you've done the work and you have the right exhibits and you have the right experts and you picked the right jury, and now they want to award your client money. But they have no idea how much you want. So what I do is, in my opening statement to the jury, I tell them, you're not going to hear me ask for any sum of money. It's not because I forgot it. It's because I'm not allowed to tell you how much we want. And they look at me like, well, what are we supposed to do? The six of us are going to go into a room and decide how much to award, assuming they've decided to award you money, but where they pick the number from. And our group that we're all members of are trying to advocate that the jury, that we be allowed to tell the jury how much we're asking for. And it's something that the insurance company should want as well, because if we say we want $300,000 and there's no chance that the verdict's going to be $1 million. But now, where they don't know, in a case that's worth $300,000, the jury can return $1 million. So to give the insurance company the certainty they like, we're trying to convince them that our plan is the correct plan, but it's an uphill struggle. I can tell you that jurors are so confused that one time I was in the middle of a trial, and as a juror was walking out to lunch, he whispered to me, how much money do you want? I had to report that communication to the judge because of the ethics situation. But, we had to tell him, we're not allowed to tell you. And now you can use, the one thing we have is we can look at someone's life expectancy and tell the jury, this person has 300,000 hours to live. And we could write that 300,000 in big numbers on the blackboard or in the flip chart and hope that some juror may say, well, all right, 300, let's give him $1 an hour. Let's give him $5 an hour. You're not allowed to suggest the dollar amount, but you can at least suggest that they apply a unit of money to each hour that someone has to live. And we have found that the lawyers that have used that have found that at least that's helpful, giving them an airport guiding lights down the runway to try to steer them in the right direction.
That's awesome, Mike.
Yeah.
Thanks
Mike.
a lot again.
Yeah.
And Mike, seriously,
So
thank you for your...
Jerry, thank you, Mark, and I like to remind everybody whenever I finish stuff like this that, it's so important for lawyers and for even non-lawyers to remember that you always have to do what's right in life.
Yeah.
Lawyers and people can never get in trouble if they follow, I teach my kids and grandkids, you always do what's right even if no one knows about it. And I also try to tell people to balance their work life, and because, what's the good of working, 1 million hours a week and accumulating all this money and not being able to spend time with your friends and family. So with that, Mark and Jerry, thank you so much for having me on Jersey Justice. It's been a real honor being here.
Thanks, Mike. It was awesome.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Mike. Yeah.
Those are great stories, too.
Great.
Great talking to you.